Welcome everyone to another session of 30 Minutes with a Modern Mystic. And this is kind of an unusual situation because we're doing one just right one day after we did our last one. And that's because the topic of suicide and euthanasia has created more response than most other topics. And so we decided to dive a little deeper. And welcome, Michael.
Thank you, Sascha, and I'm not quite sure where we're going to dive.
And to be honest, I mean, when you came up with the topic yesterday, you said that you would feel, or that you would have observed, or that you are aware of it being something very, how should we put this? It's something that a lot of people right now are concerned with, or that there are more suicides than ever before.
There are huge numbers of suicides, and yeah, it's a sort of, with the COVID, the lockdowns caused depression, and that increased the number of suicides. You know, it makes you wonder how many lives did we save with the lockdowns, because so many people committed suicide and still are. Basically, we have a world when you've got to look at it this way as well. When you live as deeply in the illusion as this humanity is now, there is no line of thought that will take you to a place of pure peace, because the illusion doesn't allow it. It's like people are living in the matrix, and you have to get out of that. And when you know that you have history behind you as an eternal being, and it's in front of you as an eternal being, you realize that this too will pass, and you don't get as terrified. Most people today live with fear. I've forgotten what that feels like, but most people live with it all the time, and the fears come from many directions and many causes. And all this takes them to that place where they feel they can't deal with it. And it's not a good place to go. But what I was saying yesterday is suicide is not a crime or sin against God.
I had a couple people write in who basically said that the last 2 or 3 years through this whole pandemic time, let's say it's been a dark time for them, even though they might be spiritually oriented people, still with all this stuff, you know, with relatives, with work, with travel restrictions and all that stuff going on. And so we didn't really go into that part of the topic yesterday, the current times and suicide. I think we didn't touch upon that. And the current, like, what makes this time so special, and why are there more suicides now than ever before, from your perspective?
Well, this was something you didn't want to touch yesterday, the current times.
That's why we're talking now.
Well, I didn't even say that. The simple fact is that we are going through, as humanity, for most people, a dark night of the soul. I chose to go ahead. I've been through my dark night of the soul years back in the past, and it was a lonely one. Now we're doing it en masse because I saw this coming. We're doing it en masse. And so what I would say to people is, if you're suicidal and deeply depressed and see no way out, the first thing you've got to realize is death is not the way out. And if you're on your spiritual path, and if you're not, you won't be listening to me, almost certainly. But if you're on your spiritual path, you can almost rest assured that suicide will keep you in more of the old, more of the same. And you'll be stuck in the old movie until you come out of it. And so suicide is closing the door on newness and on the higher, finer timeline that is now here. It's happening now. It'll put you out of that. So that's one good reason not to. Another one is recognize that you are facing the dark night of the soul. Recognize that this is a challenge and a test on your ethical nature, on your integrity, on the strength of your character, on your spiritual trust and faith. Because if you have trust, you don't have suicide. So suicide always has to be based on a lack of trust. And if you want to measure your trust, how deep is the anxiety? And if you have deep, deep anxiety, then you don't have much trust. Whereas if you have trust, you have no anxiety, and therefore you're not on the path to suicide. And so trust is a very much better alternative. The problem is, of course, and it's always the problem, we have been led down the path over the last tens of thousands of years of intellectual development, left brain development without whole brain development. And that we're now paying the price of that. Suicide is part of the price of that, because if you grow up and you're whole brain, if you're naturally that way, or teach yourself to be whole brain, you always see the bigger picture. And in the bigger picture, you really don't see death and endings as any, it's not even part of the picture. It's not real. There is no suicide. It's just a quick return trip. And so we needed to learn to cultivate trust. So we've been taken out on the left brain dominance, which breeds fear, it breeds negative imagination rather than positive imagination. It doesn't have to be negative, but it mostly is. And it creates anxieties and worries, because you can't be left brain dominant without, shall we say, a degree of that type of anxiety. In other words, it affects your thinking, it affects your emotions. Thoughts precede emotions. So when thoughts are no longer holistic, but see themselves as separate from the whole, then the emotions follow that, which is all blind, going the wrong way. You know, we're not separate from the whole, and you can't separate yourself from the whole through death. And so all it does is delay the inevitable, because you will come back. Whatever that challenge was, you're going to say hello to it again. So better by far to deal with it. And that isn't easy, and nor is it designed to be easy, because life has not done this to you. You have created this for yourself. You're in every moment of your life, you are creating the content and direction of every moment of your life. So if your creation has brought you to the point of suicide, then at that point, you could also use creation to take you away from it.
Would you say that suicide, if you are a right brain oriented person, is out of the picture, is not possible?
I know, I wouldn't say it's out of the picture, but it's very unlikely. It's very unlikely.
Because you're not in fear.
Well, because no, I wouldn't say being right brain means you're not in fear. I was born right brain, and I'd certainly have my share of fear. But right brain does move from the heart rather than the head. The right brain connects with the heart, and is very much heart driven, and there's a lot of intuition going on. And if you're tuning into your intuition would always say suicide is not the way to deal with this. Your intuition knows that clearly, because you'll just be back again. But what you have to remember is we're in a society that actually believes in death. We're the only species on this planet that believes in death, and we consider we're the most intelligent species. the whole idea of death has no intelligence. It's just ridiculous. So it doesn't work. You cannot, in the end, commit suicide. All you can do is transition from your physical body. I wrote about it on my Facebook. Basically, suicide is to end your life. To end your life means death, and there is no death. So the whole thing is doomed to fail from the word go. And I would say, don't do it. I would say, go and look at a funny movie and laugh. Like, seriously, Patch Adams, when he had terminal cancer, stage 4 terminal cancer, he decided, if I'm going to die, I'm going to die laughing.
I remember that story. Yeah.
He lived. He laughed and laughed and laughed, and the whole body changed, and the energy lifted, and he didn't die. And so he put that movement right through the hospitals. And that's a beautiful, true story. You should see the movie, Patch Adams.
Some of these stories that have come in evolve around emotional, being emotionally overwhelmed. So
Yeah.
even though you are on your spiritual path and whatever, just circumstances and everything that happens in your life puts you in a place where you feel emotionally overwhelmed to a degree where nothing makes sense anymore, and there's no more reasoning or feeling or thinking. It's just this big too much, What would you say is a good way? I mean, certainly you should talk to somebody. Certainly you should seek assistance. But if you are in that situation, if you find yourself in that super dark place, which is one big too much and emotionally completely overwhelmed, is there something practical you would like to share with people that they could do?
The problem is, most people, we have something called emotional intelligence, but we don't use it. A lot of people don't even know it exists. Probably the mainstream don't even know there's something called emotional intelligence. And with that, we can create so-called miracles. So what we use is, rather than use emotional intelligence, we just get in the deepest, darkest place of emotions. We go into emotional despondency. And so what we're doing is creating ourselves and lowering our energy into a lower astral realm. Now, you can use drugs and alcohol to put yourself in a lower astral realm. And when you're in a lower astral realm, then words of logic and reason, like you don't have to do this, no longer make any sense, because you're resonating now on a much, much denser, lower level. I've been, metaphysically, I visited the place where humans are. Well, I won't go into that. It's too tricky. But I visited the lower astral realms where there is no hope. And it's a terrible, terrible situation to be in. And that's what I think a lot of people who are suiciding, they have somehow lowered themselves into a lower astral realm. And what they need to do, basically, is ask for help. And although this sounds crazy, when I was living in the community, one morning I woke up, and I never felt it before. I felt, over here they call it the black dog. That's depression. It's named the black dog.
Okay.
Yeah, it's named the black dog over here. A friend of mine, not long ago, he committed suicide because a black dog never left him alone. It was terrible. He's either on drugs or terribly depressed. And he committed suicide. And I could almost feel rejoicing for him, because there was no path left. That was the only one. Anyway, that's beside the point. So I will say this. I think there are rare occasions when suicide is the only path, but that is rare. and it is not the most of the suicides. Now, I had this morning, I woke up and I felt this terrible, terrible depression settle on me, and I could really relate to the black dog. I'd never experienced it before, and I had no idea where it came from, but I knew somehow that I couldn't defeat this. It was impossible. And I had the sense, because I was on my spiritual path, in the community, I went to several of my friends and I said, I don't know what's happening, but I feel as though I'm under psychic attack. I'm feeling this terrible, terrible, terrible depressive energy on me. I'm asking you, please don't leave me alone all day. And I have a feeling I will try to get away from you. If I go to the toilet, stand outside of it, just don't leave me, because I'm frightened of what will happen if you do. So I asked 3 of my friends, and they stayed with me all day and they never left me. And they decided to practice singing. And I have never heard anything so ghastly in my life as these 3 guys who couldn't sing practice singing. And so they attempted to make me laugh. They couldn't. I just wasn't in that place. But they didn't leave me alone. And when I went to bed that night, Trini knew about it. And I said to her, if I'm screaming in the night, wake me up for God's sake. Anyway, I woke up next morning, it had gone and it never returned. And I've always owed that to those 3 people. 2 of them are dead now, and there's only 1 still alive. I still owe it. I owe that to them. They kept me together. They wouldn't allow me to be alone. They kept talking to me. They made me pretty much enter their reality. They pulled me into their reality and wouldn't let me get lost and drowned in mine, and because I would have done. I don't know what would have happened. I don't even want to go there. But I know alone I couldn't do it. And so I would say to anybody who is on the verge of suicide, find those people in your life who you could count as a friend and tell them you're suicidal. You just need them to be with you a day, 2 or 3 days, and talk to you and talk you up, lift you up, talk you up in life. Talk to you about the joys of life, the beauty of life, laugh over your childhood if they're childhood friends. And if they can speak truth to you, if you're open to it, then to do that as well. Mine didn't talk anything spiritual, just gardening and things I loved and talking stuff I liked. And they kept me from this terrible place. And because I've never, that's the only one day that I was suicidal. I was definitely suicidal. But I don't know whether I would have done. I doubt it. But that was and if they live like that, I can't imagine how terrible that is. And but there is a way out. That's without question. And in the end, you are the way out because you found your way in. But you can ask for help to find your way out. And there are some wonderful people who know how to counsel you out of this. And so I really would use that. But nothing is actually better than close friends where you're completely honest with them and say, this is my problem. Today I will kill myself unless you help me. And I'm pretty sure if they're friends, they will help you.
Okay. I guess something else could be nature, right? And I think you mentioned that before in some other talk, like how nature, if you're in a dark place, just through.
Well, the funny thing is with nature, I mean, for me, moving into nature is like a beautiful, uplifting experience. But there are people who are afraid of nature.
I'm going to
There are
bring them
people,
into a darker space, yeah.
There are people, if you suddenly put them in a forest, would be screaming fear.
Okay.
And you certainly wouldn't want to get lost in an Australian bush because people die out there.
Which would solve the issue of the suicide.
certainly saves it. But I mean, we're
So there was a question regarding, I'm not going to read all of it, but regarding euthanasia, and basically, if you are the one pushing the button for somebody, do you accumulate any karma for you? Like if you are the agent in that euthanasia process, does
so
that
the
have any
soul.
repercussion? Does that have any repercussions for you?
It wouldn't for me. You've got to remember, we're creators. So if I believe that pressing that button and I'm going to get karma, then I will get karma because I believed it and created it. Like the early Aboriginals, when the white people first came here, if the witch doctor pointed the bone at an Aboriginal, he would die. That's all you had to do. You didn't need a gun. You just point the bone. But if that Aboriginal pointed the bone at you or I, we wouldn't die because we'd just laugh and say, so what's that bone got to do with anything? Because so now if I push the button for anyone to die, I would have no repercussions at all because I'd say, okay, I'm satisfied that this person is disease is terminal, they're suffering. I care about them. I have compassion for them. There's no more, this is not necessary.
Maybe the key is, maybe the key
So
would be, I'm sorry.
But if you're a Catholic and that's a sin and you press it, well, you're going to cop it because you would you would do it to yourself.
I guess it boils down to staying true to your own truth, right? And if it's your truth
like
that you,
Shakespeare, to thine own self be true. And if you asked to press a button and it was against your ethics and integrity, you should not press the button. But if you felt, I love this person and I love them, this is not death, this is transition, this is my act of love, then you press the button and it is an act of love. You see, there is no answer. And this is just about with everything right across the board. People say, what is the future? And I say, whose do you mean? My future is wonderful, but I'm not going to say that's the same for everybody.
We had some people write in nice things too. Like, for example, there were 2 or 3 who actually kind of shared their same story, and that was a story of having realized that they were addicted to suicide, maybe not in this lifetime, but they felt this addiction in themselves and that they overcame it. And so that is nice to mention too. And I know that we touched upon that topic yesterday, that you can be addicted to suicide. But
it's a nasty. It can be a habit or addiction, but it's a bad one. And if you ever have that suspicion that you have this addiction toward suicide, for God's sake, don't go there.
I was thinking of asking them to come on here because I think it's great for people who find themselves in these places and that who have not overcome it, to hear from people who have actually done it. And but yeah, anyhow, so I mean, I think it's nice to share this story with everybody, that yes, it is possible and people can overcome. You can overcome.
And if you're open enough to realize that that you obviously then know of incarnation and that you can be addicted to suicide, you're well on your path. I mean, you realize you're an immortal being, and you've got the wherewithal. It's the ones who believe in nothing. Their life is a desert of despair. That's the tricky ones. And, it's ignorance is like Thomas Merton, the renegade Catholic priest. He said, if there is no sin, and if there is one, it is ignorance. And that means to ignore. And ignore your own inner promptings, ignore truth. Because if one person has truth in their heart, everyone has it. but we've been taught to think from the brain, not so much to feel from the heart. And this is what the mainstream of public do. They think from the brain. They don't think from the heart. And yet that's the center of intelligence.
Also, I believe as we are going through this dark night of the soul as a global society right now, and we are at that moment where it's either love or fear, it's either growth or more of the same, like we've spoken about so many times now. Potentially somebody who is at the verge of committing suicide is at that very moment where their potential is the biggest, like that moment where it could all flip and burst into light.
I have said many times in the intensive, if you're suicidal, you're walking on the edge of the knife, and you're going to go, there's two ways to go. You can fall deeper into death, illusion, or you can equally you're so close to falling into truth. And it's just an inner smile, and you step into truth, and you think, oh my God, and you've woken up. Because the knife edge of suicide is a knife edge of life. The knife edge of death is a knife edge of life. It's always been that way. The sword's edge, which way does the sword swing?
That's a beautiful way to say it, yep. And then ironically, like if you look at the way modern life is set up, and if you want to go into that lifestyle being set up or engineered by certain elites so that you do get sick, that you do get depressive, that you might get suicidal, it's kind of ironic that it would put you into a place where also the potential for light is the biggest, right? So it's not only what they want, but it's also possibly the opposite.
That's, to me, if I was going to give God a name, it would be the endless song of infinite balance. And that point on the edge of the knife or the sword, your balance is tipping. You can go one way or the other. You can fall into truth, just the same as you can fall deeper into illusion. But it's an interesting place to be.
And in that regard, just as with what has been so present the last 2-3 years, this whole topic that we don't want to mention too much because we don't want that video to get deleted. It's kind of, it has pushed so many people towards awakening, right? That we're not awakened or interested or aware of certain things before, but just through learning about these things, it pushed them more towards the light. Of course, the opposite is true too for many people, but it had that effect as well.
I'm not sure I understood all.
Yeah, so that through the whole pandemic thing, people have been forced to look at certain things if they were open.
To avoid awakening.
Well, either way, right? You'd have to pick either way. You stay in that bubble or you awake.
But the problem is with that, so many people have awakened to the fact that there is, and right through history, has been a conspiracy against humanity for ages. They awake to that, but they're still angry and aggressive and not awakening necessarily to their spiritual truth. So there are like two awakenings. And when you awaken to the fact you've been conspired against and manipulated for so long, that in some people can create a real rage. And in fact, I tend to sense that in humanity there is a growing rage. And if that ever breaks out in one, which I think it will, that will go through a period of great violence. But that rage can also take a person into suicide, because the rage turns to hopelessness. What's the point of all this? And they don't see that life is eternal and this is just one stage in the caterpillar. He's going through the death process in the metamorphosis to become a butterfly, and all he's experiencing now is the death. He doesn't realize that in death there is life, because there is no death. And that rage can take people into suicide and also into the truth. It's always a double-edged sword, pretty well everything in life. If your focus is negative and pessimistic, we tend to go the down way. But if you're naturally an optimist and you have and listen to your intuition, you'll take the up way. Because my growing as a person was pain and suffering. That was my path. This is why I don't recommend it. I've been there and done that. And pain and suffering. I used it because it was the only way I knew. But I look back now and think, God, how stupid could I have been? Well, it wasn't really that I was stupid. It was that I was programmed. But interestingly, that even by following the program, if you're prepared to go to the point of death, i.e. suicide, if you're prepared to go to the point of death, at the moment of potential death, it's a moment of potential freedom also. I found the freedom door.
I guess that's one of the maybe most important insights from today's session, right? That moment, that very moment when you are ready to commit suicide could be your moment of awakening, could be that moment of your highest potential emerging.
It's an old paradox. The moment you're ready to die is the moment you're ready to live. And all the rest has been a preparation. Like people talk to me on when I had a near-death experience, and I smile at them and say, I'm sorry, but that was your first ever near-life experience. The rest of your life was near-death the whole time. You had a near-life experience. Some of them actually get it. Others just don't get it and feel a little bit threatened by that. But it's a true one. The near-death experience, that they suddenly saw a greater picture, heck, that's there every day, every moment of life. That was a near-life experience. So suicide, which is certainly a near-death experience, is equally as close as a near-life experience, and can be. And in fact, there's no question, there are people who have suicided, and in that moment, they've awakened. They've lost their body, but they've awakened. I mean, this has happened. And that doesn't mean, therefore, that I recommend it as a path, but it definitely has happened, because it's been a moment of such incredible. You see, some people suicide running toward, others are running away. Each has completely different repercussions. Running away is not going to get you that, but running toward can open that door. And if you're, I was prepared to die before I would quit. And I had set this thing up. I want to be enlightened and self-realized was the word then, by the time I'm 50 or dead. Well, I was very nearly dead. At 49 and 3 months, I was very nearly dead.
You created your own version of slow suicide.
I had to play it out that I was going to die because I didn't think I had any choice, having made an agreement that was accepted. And so death hovers a lot of way. For instance, before I became in the week before actual enlightenment, which is still in this moment and is never in linear time, but when you tell a story, it has to be. 5 nights I dreamt that I died. 5 nights in a row. I was getting seriously worried by the end of that. I thought to myself, oh my God, this is going to happen. And so death and life are so close. And suicide dying and suicide living, they're right on the cusp of each other. Okay. And that moment of desperation that takes you to the point you're going to leap out, is exactly the same energy and the point where you can leap in.
Which also could be that extra inspiration for people who want to help close ones that they feel are suicidal, to just be there for them and help them towards that light, towards that upliftment.
That would be, I can't help looking at mainstream people and realizing it's a pretty hopeless situation, but also spiritual people, also, aware people also reach that place. And definitely, like if you have a person with terminal cancer and you're their carer, talk to them about this journey they're on, this incredible journey. They're nearly across the ocean, and there's this beautiful tropical island filled with love waiting for them, new adventures. Let them realize this isn't the end. This is just it's not another beginning, it's continuity. But let's also call it a glorious beginning, because if we're going to live in the illusion, we might as well use it occasionally to our advantage. And so it's that one journey is coming to an end and another one is beginning. Although it's the same journey, it's new beginnings in the same journey.
Very nice. Something.
But what you can't do in the talk like this, a discussion, you cannot draw a conclusion. You can't say, okay, this is what you do, because everybody's different. Everybody is different. And this is what we're inclined to do, pigeonhole people and give them answers that might be answers for 1,000, but this one is no answer at all.
Something that I want to throw in is from my own experience, that if you see someone, if you know somebody and you get a feeling that they might be suicidal, talk to them. Be not afraid to mention it. And if you're a friend, if you're a good friend, they will be happy for you to mention it, because they might never do it. And then maybe one day it's too late. So for you to realize it, to feel it about your friend, your partner, whoever it is, to go walk up to them and say, hey, I noticed that, is there anything I can help you with?
I absolutely agree. Do you know they're actually advertising on our television? If you have a friend that's depressed and suffering, go to them, speak to them.
Oh, nice.
And I thought to myself, wow, a few good things come across. Just the same as you don't let a mate drive home drunk.
Right.
Because he could kill himself if he's in a depressed state and walking. He can kill himself. So yes, I agree with you. Reach out, reach out. This is what we need to do, to reach out to each other. In a way, this is why I'm online, to reach out to people. In fact, it's not in a way. This is why I'm online.
This is why we're doing the second video in a row in 2 days.
Exactly, because I've got a friend already arrived here, and he'll be waiting on me.
And it's 10 p.m. here.
So do reach out to anybody who's in need or help, and it's a matter of, we help each other, we share money with each other. People who can't feed themselves, we help them to feed. We share money, we share ourselves, we share our energy with each other. That way we rise. That's the way we rise. That is love in action. That's the power of creation. When you reach out to another person, you're helping them to recreate their life in a higher way. And that's love, recreating their life in the image of love. And why do you reach out to them? Because you care, because you love them. Because care and compassion and love, they're all the same thing. We help each other.
Let's all rise together. Everybody who's listening, thank you so much for spending the time with us. And
thank you. And I'm glad the topic interested you, because it's topical. There's no question about that.
It surely is. And
but what we're going through, this dark night of the soul, we will come out of it. This isn't for the rest of your life, as it were, unless you're going to stop breathing tomorrow. But this is a process. We have to go through it. There's never a choice. We created it, and we have to go through it. This is called effect. we, humanity, created the cause. Okay, Sasha, I love you and leave you.
All right, everybody.
Everybody,
as
thank you, and
famous
I love you.
as the famous Mr. Rhodes always says, choose love.
Choose love.